All right, welcome. This is a living library conversation. It is the first in a series that I'll be hosting here in the next couple of months, focusing on trauma sensitive leadership. So what I've been noticing in my life in the last in the last couple of months really is that when you're dealing with politics or you're dealing with religion or you're dealing with groups where there's strong ideologies, sometimes trauma gets in the way, and instead of talking to each other, we're debating with each other or we're having arguments. So the purpose of this series is really to just kind of bring it back into conversation culture. I'm going to be role modeling how to be a reader in the living library. My friend Janet Berkowitz here, she is going to be the human book in this particular installment. So just a reminder for anyone who is a member of the Karmic Margin Call Project Time Bank that you can redeem a credit of one whole hour. We're going to be having an hour conversation that you are providing. This is a service you are providing, and you can categorize it under workshops, classes, tutorials, and just make a reference in the notes that this was a living library conversation that you listened to. So that being said, Janet, welcome. It's always a pleasure speaking with you. This is your second living library conversation. We had one with Pratibha a couple of months ago. But
No, that was almost a year ago.
was it almost a year ago? I think it was because I met Pratibha in April of last year, and we probably did that in May
Mhm.
or June. So let's just start with the work that we're doing together. We are doing an initiative called the Bridge, which in my experience, what it feels like is that we're trying to help mental health practitioners talk to mental health peers and kind of bring the relationship more into alignment. We've also been, doing the Wizard of Is, which is a play about suicide and bullying, and we've done workshops around that. Just tell me a little bit, review for me. I know the story, but tell me about the origins of this work that you've done with creative crisis care, and what is your origin story about how you got into this work, working with suicide, working with bullying, working with all of these these intense topics.
So, my history is trauma. So, my work is trauma informed.
Mhm.
It is inspired by the pain and misery that I experienced in childhood and the desire to help those going through a similar pattern in their lives to pass through it with more love and acceptance rather than the the old paradigm, which is that you have to push behaviors away, make them stop. They're bad, they're wrong, you have to get rid of them. I don't work that way anymore because it hasn't worked.
Mhm.
So my basic story is that starting at age 3, I was picked on a lot, teased and bullied. And I can only, looking back, I can only imagine that it came from the fact that I was just a quiet, shy kid who didn't have any clever comebacks and was smart. I was intelligent. And as my mother said, kids were jealous of me.
Mhm.
That didn't help me as a child to think about that. So I pretended to be not as intelligent. I stooped my shoulders forward because I was tall. Whatever was going on outside of me, I tried to blend into that, and it didn't work. I guess, whatever my nature was, I seemed to attract all of this teasing and being picked on. And even two of my quote unquote best friends turned on me. They now have a term for it, frenemies.
Yeah.
So up until fourth grade, I had a friend that kept doing things that were unkind. I mean, really unkind. Like I was just writing this morning about how I went to a party, a Barbie party that my friend had, and I only had a Tammy doll. My mother couldn't afford the Barbie thing. And Tammy was a more country like kind of girl. And everybody had their Barbie dolls with them. And my friend took my Tammy doll away from me and handed it to someone else who already had a Barbie doll. And I'm sitting there with nothing.
Mm,
and trying to hold the tears in. I'm sure anyone who's ever been bullied knows that feeling of that lump in the throat. You're trying to keep it all down. And then in fifth grade, my quote unquote new best friend turned on me when I tried to help her get closer to someone she liked. And she got mad at me when I went to her and told her I had done that, thinking she would be happy with me. And it reminds me of the time I gave a dog a piece of meat and bent down, expecting him to lick my face in gratitude, and he bit it instead.
yeah.
So it's,
Mm,
it was always that pattern with me. I tried to be nice to the bullies and try to make them my friends more so, and it just made things worse. And my mother said try to ignore them, and I tried that. That made things worse. There was nothing that was helping. And so I became suicidal at age 9. And and then I just kept coming back, through my teen years, through my adult years. It just kept returning, and it would last for about a year, where all I could hear was the word suicide in a massive repetitive rant in my head.
mhm.
I've never made an attempt, which is a blinking miracle. I've come so close, but I've always put myself in a hospital when it comes to it. And finally, 15 years ago, when I was with with a wonderful partner, he too started going through it. And I now look back and realize that we were brought together to start the work we were doing. He had the technical know-how how to put us on the map. And so I had been teaching theater to children, and even that wasn't satisfying. I just could feel like I had to do something deeper with the theater, and I used art a lot with kids. And I finally entered a hospital for suicidal ideation right after my husband had. And while I was there, he made an attempt, and he blamed himself for what I was going through. And when I came out, I started to get better. And I said to him, I think we have to do something about this. There's a reason we went through this together. And so we started our business. I now call it creative crisis care. I, I'm drawn to crisis. I don't know. I often feel comfortable in crisis situations. They're very real. People in crisis usually are so desperate, they become very real. And that is what I'm drawn to. And that's why I work with you. You're drawn to the same thing, that realness. And so now Mike and I are working on our play, The Wizard of Iz, which is lightly based on The Wizard of Oz. And um, I will be playing my feelings, which are parts of me. And I do a form of therapy called internal family systems, where in therapy, I get to talk to parts of myself. And for every part I do come to realize, I find like two more. They just keep growing, all these parts, and I love talking to my parts, and then I become myself, my higher self again, and I talk to the part, and the part talks to my higher self, and we make amends to each other. I just love therapy, and I love therapeutic processes, and I do love this bridge work that we're doing. Really nice stuff, the bridging the gap between two elements that need to learn how to talk to each other.
Yeah, absolutely. What's alive for me, and I'm going to kind of pull the curtain back on how these living library conversations work as well too. As a reader, what I do is I take in what you had just shared, and I express what resonates with me, what's alive with me. Sometimes I'll ask just a clarifying question as well. But what was really alive for me as you were recalling your story was with the friends. It's kind of like when you have friends at a young age, it's almost like you feel safe. But then when they turn on you, that feeling of safety really gets thrown out the window. And that's kind of like, I've identified that as part of the trauma that I'm dealing with right now. It's like when you have friends and you feel like, you're connecting with someone and it's, and you experience a lot of joy with them, but then the next day they turn on you. It's almost like that safety has just been completely disrupted. And I've had similar experiences like that, and I've dealt with suicidal ideation as well at that young of an age, and I think that's why we click so well, Janet, and we've been doing this work for so long. Um, but yeah, that was just what was alive for me is that complete feeling of resonance with understanding what it's like to deal with all of these deep feelings at such a young age and
Yeah.
just not having anywhere to go that feels safe to be able to to be able to express it. So I wanted to reflect that back. And I think that's where, this work in being trauma sensitive or trauma informed, really, really kind of bubbles up to the surface as well. Because what we ask in trauma informed practices, a lot of the times when there's conflict or there's judgments or there's these unsafe environments, the question that's being asked subliminally is like, what's wrong with you? But in trauma informed practices, we change the question from what's wrong with you to what happened to you. So what really happened to you? So yeah, so that was just what is alive for me in that. And what I wanted to also observe as well too, and since you mentioned your husband Phil and the work that you were doing, I was reflecting on we've been doing this work for almost 8 years because my son's going to be turning 8 in June, and we started kind of playing with this work before he was born, so in May of 2017. So it's been 8 years, and I constantly think of I think of the week that my son was born. My wife was in labor for 5 days, and I was trying to orchestrate a meeting between you and Phil and a theater company that I was involved with at the time, and that was all going on while my son was being born, and it was not long after that Phil transitions passed. And I think about that often. You know, that I always think about Phil. I always feel like Phil is constantly a presence. When we're working and when we're doing this. But anyway, I just wanted to ask you about yeah, if you could communicate with Phil right now, if you can tune into Phil's energy, what do you think Phil would be contributing to this living library conversation?
I just hear him saying what he kept saying to other people, kept saying, I got on the Janet train. And
Yeah.
I would say to him, I got on the Phil train, and I got on your train, Mike. And that's what I think. I think that's the trick here is to find the trains that you feel comfortable traveling with
Mhm.
or on. And the train that we've been traveling on has been exquisite. It really has. I don't know if you've never seen me do this, but when we come out of our gigs, I go like this. It's wait, I don't think you
Oh,
can see it without I have to get I
there you
fist
go.
bump myself.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
I fist bump myself.
yeah,
Yeah.
very good.
And it's me fist bumping with Phil.
Mm,
And I know that he would be he's cheering us on. I just know that. You know what he said to me also that I loved once? When we started our chapter of Suicide Anonymous, because there was only one chapter in Memphis and it was a live one. People couldn't come from all over the world, only if you lived in that area. So Phil put it on the internet. And so people could start coming worldwide. And the people at my day, I was in a day program at the time, for my suicidal ideation. And the counselors were saying to me, don't do it. You're going to get borderline people who use it for attention. They talk
mm,
about suicide. And Phil said to me, I don't care. If they use the word suicide in a sentence, they get my ear.
mm,
And that meant so much to me. He really taught me how to listen to people. And That's truly, sometimes I'll be teaching and I'll hear him say that to me, Janet, just listen, just take a breath and just listen. I'm not the best listener. I'm a great, creator of exercises. I'm great at facilitating, but I'm not the best listener. And that's why I think that I have ADHD. Um, I'm getting tested for that now because I truly can lose a train of thought in the middle. And that's why I love working with you and the rest of our bridge team, because you guys are amazing listeners and really know, and good questioners. You know how to create the questions out of what you're hearing, like you're doing here. I'm so amazed. And I'm learning how to do that. But I'm not picking up all the conversations as well as you guys do. Um, but that's what Phil did.
Mhm.
And when he passed away, and by the way, he passed of natural causes after helping me so much to build up our work in suicide prevention, um, which included this bridge workshop and The Wizard of Iz, the show. Um, I thought, I can't do this. I won't be able to do it without him. And look what God has brought me. The rest of you who are helping me to do it even 10 times more amazingly than he and I did it, far beyond my wildest dreams. And so I truly do see how God, whatever you call God, I call God love. Same thing to me. Love energy, divinity, whatever, how it provides. The universe really provides. And I really notice the providing when I stop pushing it, when I return to my breathing, when I'm more centered in each moment, when I'm noticing the birds and I'm noticing the dog more. Simple things like that. That's when stuff starts happening.
Yeah, yeah.
That's my observation.
Yeah, what's very much alive for me is, how your word for God is love. And I'm reminded in one of the Matrix movies, there was this line where a computer program who, looks like a man, has a daughter, and he says, the reason why, I'm doing this is because I love my daughter very much. And the Keanu Reeves character said, "You speak of love. Love is a human emotion. How can a program, speak of love?" And the program says,
Right,
"Well, love is a word. What matters is the connection the word implies."
right.
So that's what's very much alive for me as well, and why I feel being able to have these conversations and hold this space, because I do think there is a nice intersection, a nice conversation that happens when we include spirituality and include observations in mental health. Because to me, mental health acknowledges trauma, where I feel like a lot of spiritual practices tend to bypass trauma. And that's why I feel like why we click so well is, our first conversation. I remember our first conversation on the phone. We spoke astrology. We were both very fluent in astrology, and it was like an awesome conversation. It was just like, okay, my sun's here, my moon's here, my ascendant's here, and it's like, oh, okay, so this is true. So what I really appreciate about our friendship, Janet, and about our work together is this respect for both the spirituality and the mental health aspects of the work you do
Yeah.
and the work we're doing together. Um, and why I hope as I'm continuing to have these conversations and bringing people back to our work with the bridge and our work with the Wizard of Iz and all of this work is to be able to be open about the spiritual element of what we do, the spiritual element of that intersection between mental health and spiritual, belief. So let's talk about the bridge a little bit because I'm going to be linking up. I'm going to be linking. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say this before I forget. First of all, even the mental health system has not addressed trauma informed care very
Mhm.
well until maybe the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Um, and also, I want to say that I think there is a tremendous tie-in between spirituality and mental health because I think a lot of the sickness, the spiritual illness in the world is due to mental health issues.
Yes.
Religious issues. Religion has caused a lot. I've worked with so many people that live in the terror. I'm talking about my mental health peers that
Hmm.
live in the terror of going to hell because they were told they would if they didn't do certain things. It's really scary to see a lot of this. And I didn't grow up with it. I was raised in a Jewish family, so I don't the words hell were not part of my upbringing.
Hmm.
And so I just saw a lot of fear amongst my peers with this kind of thing. And I there's not much I can do about it. I can't change their minds. I can only love them. I
Yeah.
can only give them love. And I want to say one other thing before we move on to the bridge.
Hmm.
I've studied this course in miracles, and it's uh continuation called A Course of Love for about 45 years now.
Hmm.
And um uh what its message really is that everything is either love or a call for love. And under a call for love comes the fear and the shame and the under it's really fear. And under fear is everything else, the anger, the shame, the blah, 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 blah. And so that is my really simple way of looking at life. Is this person in a loving state, or are they calling for love? And right now I see a tremendous call for love in the world. And that's where spirituality and mental health issues are blending and needing to be looked at.
Yeah.
So go ahead. Now you wanted to ask about the bridge, which
Yeah,
really,
yeah. I wanted to, yeah, what's alive for me as well, too, to piggyback on that idea about, it's either an expression of love or a call for love. I really see that in our political world right now as well, too, where I feel like what both sides really have in common is that there is trauma involved there, and
yes.
instead of looking at what happened to the individual, we're telling these stories, this politician's right or this politician's wrong. Yep. Yep. Okay, Bubba, why don't you ask me one or two?
I just want to tell you,
Mhm.
I have basically taken the word wrong, right, good, bad. I don't use those words as much as I can help it anymore. They're just clumsy words to me. They don't say what's really happening. And also, I don't use the word depressed really anymore. I ask what's under that. Mad, glad, sad. Well, mad, sad, fear, shame, and what derivatives of that. And that's what we work on in the bridge a lot. We talk a lot about we that's one of the bases of our work is the five main emotions, which I think really has been a good basis to work on. And also what you have brought to it, Mike, the concept of let's look at our values. People ain't looking at their values. They're living from out of them unconsciously. And so you have brought to the bridge. That's what we started with. When we started building the bridge, we started with your six main conversations about values. So I see that and the emotions as a big base of what we're doing to bridge these gaps.
Yeah, and that's really what this conversation is. It's an appreciation conversation where we're listening for that common ground. So yeah, I will ask you about kind of like the genesis of the bridge that you and Phil had established. But I'll also for those who are listening here as well too, I'm going to link this conversation up back to our original bridge conversations, where we did start to pull out the values, where we ask ourselves, are we practicing deeper honesty? Are we practicing unconditional positive regard? That was also what came out of that conversation. Are we practicing creativity? Are we giving ourselves the opportunity to be creative? So those are some of the things that when we were doing those foundational conversations, those are some of the values that came out of that, where it's an invitation to ask ourselves, before we point our finger at somebody else and say, this person is doing this or this person is not doing that. Ask yourself, am I showing up ready to practice unconditional positive regard? That was a big one for me from our conversations. Am I willing to think outside the box and bring a creative suggestion? So anyway, Janet, yes, please. I would like to hear the story again about how you and Phil kind of created the genesis of what has become the bridge.
Thank you. I really appreciate you asking about Phil. And I can just see him here today, just smiling big time that you care. So, what happened was in 2010, I got out of the hospital for the third time in that year, and they were giving me shock treatments galore. And I didn't feel like anyone was really quite listening to me except the nun who worked in the hospital. And she would pray with me and she would just listen to me very compassionately. And even though I was Jewish, I accepted this from her. She would do these Christian prayers and I loved it because she would hold my hands, that contact. No one else was doing that with me. You know, professionals are trained not to touch you, you know. And so Phil was also going through a day program at the same time after he had made his attempt and had been hospitalized also a couple of times. We were taking turns that year going in and out of the hospital. So a couple of years into our recovery, we started discussing what we were noticing that our peers, that's a fellow person, we could, Mike and I and my group, we call them challengers. We don't like the word consumer, which is the current word for a mental health patient, because we consume, you know, services. And we felt that was a terrible name. So we like to use challengers. So we were listening to our fellow challengers and all the things that were going wrong for them with other therapists, with their, you know, and their providers. So we pulled together, we got this idea to use all of the theater games we had been, both of us were teaching theater, and pull together, you know, different processes that we were teaching and using them in a workshop to help consume challengers and providers meet in the same room and talk about what works and doesn't work. And so we didn't have many, we had more challengers there because we knew them from our programs, but we did at that point know a number of providers. Some of them were like me, certified peer specialists. That means that they were challengers, but they had trained to work in the field. And it was a beautiful, beautiful workshop. We filmed it. It's on the website for Creative Crisis Care. And we split them up. We let them we let them just complain about what worked, what didn't work, you know, what bothered them. Everything from, you know, a provider might say, I don't like when my peers hold their phones under the table and try to, you know, text, to, you know, challengers saying things like, you know, um, I don't like when they push me to talk about suicidal ideation in front of everyone. It's too private, whatever it was. There were a whole list that we came up with for both sides. And we just did different kinds of exercises where they got to look at, you know, some was artwork. They got to do a big collage of a timeline of a peer going from we called it that was actually the first bridge thing. We would draw a bridge on the paper and they had to look at you know, recovery. How did they bridge the gap over to recovery? And then they would put down images on the other side of, you know, what recovery looked like. But we flipped it. We had the providers go on the side of the paper where it was pre-recovery, and we had the peers go on the side of the paper of where the providers in post-recovery. And it was just very interesting to watch this process. So, you know, it went very well. And then for years it lay dormant. We just never did it again. And when Phil passed, he was like nudging me in my brain. I kept hearing it, you know, do this workshop again, create this again. And so I asked you, Mike, and then a couple of other of my friends, a few of my friends. And so we started working on it about 4 years ago, I think, or 3 years ago. I don't remember. I think it was
Yep,
three and a half.
2022. Yeah, I
Yeah,
was doing preliminary conversations at the end of 2021. So yeah, so it's
right.
been about 3.5 years now.
Yeah. And so we've done it with we've not always gotten to do it with both sides in the room. Like when we did it for teachers, the students weren't in the room, but that would be our ultimate goal, is to get them together. You'd have to have teachers be willing to hear what students don't like. you know, but they talk to us about what's difficult for them with, you know, their students. And we got to work with police, retired policemen, and some of the people that they help. We've done we did a faith-based one. I wasn't present for that one, where we worked with a conference where they discussed spirituality and religion, how faith affects these things. So it's been a wonderful journey so far. I've really enjoyed this workshop, and I'm not seeing anything around that uses so much of the arts, so many theater games and role plays. I love inside outside voice, inner outer voice, where you got two people in front, the challenger and the provider, and then two people behind them doing the inner voice, what they really want to say to each other. Because isn't that life? Most of us are not saying what we really want to say. A lot of the reason is because we haven't learned healthy communication tools yet with which to do that. If we really were to use tools that work, we would be less scared. So we attack instead. And so a lot of the bridge work is how to do that languaging without attack in it,
Yeah.
how to carefront.
Yeah, and what I've been doing the deeper dives into trauma informed practices as well, just how our bridge work really does kind of represent a lot of those trauma informed values. One of them is peer support, and by being able to kind of create the power alignment between, an authority like a practitioner and someone who might be subordinate or considered subordinate like a peer, to kind of balance out the power. That's one of the primary trauma informed practices is being able to provide peer support, feeling safe enough, creating boundaries for safety so that you can be transparent. So safety, transparency, peer support, sensitivity to cultural, gender, or historical, stories. That's why I really
Yeah.
appreciate how the inside outside voice also helps us to get to be able to identify what are the judgments and what are the stories, what are the feelings that come up, and
Yeah.
also, what are the facts? Because whenever I have, I'll fill it up after I'm done my conversation. Okay, Bubba. Okay. All right, just a moment, Micah. So yeah, so what I've been experiencing in a lot of conversations, especially when they're higher stakes conversations where people are really triggered and really feeling high emotions, being able to get to the facts about what was actually said, what was actually done. That's very hard for people to be able to pull out that data as
Right.
well. So as I'm articulating this, and I'll mention again, I'm going to be linking up the bridge conversations to this living library conversation. That bringing it back from debate, bringing it back from arguments to conversation culture. Asking, what is it that you appreciate about the person, what resonates, and yeah, so okay, Micah, just a moment. And so this is, I'm glad Mike is here for, saying this. He's really thirsty, and my daughter's not feeling well, and Laura's with Eloise. One of the things that I feel that I judge myself, about is, trying to have these conversations, and my family is right there, and I can't hide the fact that I'm a father, struggling, trying to do this work, but also have the kids to attend to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my computer with me. I'm going to move away from. I can't move away because I have my.
Well, I want to just address something while we're moving around here.
Sure. Go ahead, Micah. Let's bring
Um,
this into the kitchen, and I'll keep listening to my friend. Mhm. Go ahead.
One of the things I want, this is interesting because we're talking, one of the things that has come up is the question of where does spirituality fit into all of this? And it's interesting. Last night, I witnessed somebody telling someone, if you don't have a higher power, you can't, but. And I've realized a lot of people who are suffering with trauma don't really have a sense of a higher power. They're like, why would God let this happen to me?
Hmm.
And that's why I like to relate love to God, because you can't, you just, to push God onto someone isn't going to work. And now, personally, I believe, this is just my belief, that everybody has, I don't like the word higher power because that puts, God above us. I think we're all the same here. We've just forgotten. I mean, I'll go so far as to say we're all God. To me, love is God, that's all of us. It's all the same thing. And I feel bold saying that here, but it doesn't mean that we're all acting from that place. And I think our journey on earth is about getting back to remembrance. And I'm getting to moments where I just feel such peace that I can say, gee, this must be what God is like. This must be what it is. It doesn't last very long, but that's where I think if we're going to bring spirituality into the mental health world and vice versa, we're going to need to be very sensitive about where people are at with their concepts of God and spirituality. It's just not a good idea to try to push any of it on anyone. Um, Everybody has to find their own way to it. And I'll tell you a quick story. It's a fable of a man who's praying to God, and he says, God, I wish I could give you my shoes. I want to give you the shirt off my back. I want to give you my food. And a monk is walking by and says, that's no way to pray to God. You should just love God, and just give him your heart. And God says to the monk, the way he's praying is the same as the way you pray, but it's even more genuine. He's really, really coming from his soul. He doesn't want to correct anyone. He just wants to give me what he has. And so, Mike, I'm just realizing as I'm saying that, isn't that what we're doing? We're just giving people what we have, our experience, strength, and hope, as we say in the 12 steps.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know if that addressed what you said before, but that came to mind. I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, no, what's really alive for me as well too is what you said about not wanting to put God above us. I am completely in alignment with that because I really want to do more of this bridge work in spiritual communities, in churches.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you participated in some of my natural law and regenerative economy series as well too. And what is really alive for me is that being able to bring that power alignment, not just in the mental health world, but also in the world of spirituality. I would love to be able to go around to different, first, I guess, to the Unitarian churches and to the interfaith churches, to practice these skills so that they can reach out to the more fundamentalist religions and start from square one. What do we have in common? And right now, what we have in common is that we're living in a world of haves and have-nots, and
Mm,
most religions can relate to that. And the conversation starts with what is our common ground, and do we want to have do we what is our relationship to God? Not making it right or wrong. If we perceive God as being like a father that's a hierarchy type of thing, then the question becomes, is that okay? Is that okay? For someone like you and me, we hold the belief that it's energy, so we all are all God, and that's
right,
blasphemous, and that's very much blasphemous to a lot of the more
right.
fundamentalist religion. Yeah, go ahead.
But say we were to go into a church, right? How would this becomes a very interesting question? How could we address it? We could just say, well, to us, God is love. We don't have to go any further than that. But I think even a lot of people are starting now to address God as energy. They're starting to understand more what this is. And I think that there's ways to talk about this. I listened to a very famous spiritual speaker, Matt Kahn. He never uses the word God. It amazes me, but he's talking about it. I don't know how he does it. It's miraculous. He just talks about divinity, and we all have our own kind of divinity. And that's what I think, is what needs to be addressed. But I love that you're saying that you want to go into all kinds of churches, because that will be our challenge, is to how to find the common denominator. We can be aware in our hearts that God is not higher or lower, or there is no hell. And yet we don't even have to talk about that. All that needs to talk about is, how do we answer that call for love? What's the most practical way in this moment can you, with whatever you've got going on, sir or ma'am, whatever's happening right now, what is your call for love? What's the easiest and calmest and clearest way that we can help you to find a solution or an answer to that call for love? Or not even an answer, just to calm you enough to be with what you're going through. It's like everybody's looking for how to get over it, get through it. Well, getting through it is the answer, not getting over it. We've got to pass through our pain to really be with it. But it's time to just learn to love ourselves with it.
Yeah, that reminded me too, as well as, being present, especially when there's a lot of crises going on. Just last week, you and I helped a friend, who was feeling suicidal and had, was potentially looking at being homeless. And I realized, to me, that put a lot in perspective, especially since, I'm looking into being in the ministry as well too. I don't care about this ideological, BS, about, what religion is right, or, whose direct experience with the divine is more valid. I,
Right,
I
right.
honestly, I feel like I'm more in service, being able to stand in the crises, stand in the crisis, and be able to help, heal, economic, inequality, to help heal, these divisions, and that reveals itself in crisis. And I reached out to you when we were helping that friend last week as well too. And I'm like, since things did improve for this friend, and I spoke to this friend as well, a couple of days ago. We're There's a team forming. There's a real team that's starting to emerge, where we've got each other's backs, and that's very encouraging to me. I find a lot of joy in being able to be the calm in the storm of all this crisis. And to me, that is what I think the bridge can be. And that is what that's why I'm attracted to the religious and the spiritual communities as well too, because people are looking at their relationship to God, or their relationship to each other, through the eyes of spirit. And that it's that conversation that comes up is, do we want to subscribe to this hierarchy, where we feel like we're beneath, a priest, or we're beneath a minister, or we're beneath a president, or we're beneath an authority? Or are we going to claim our own sovereignty, our own love? And how do we see the God in the other person? How do we see the God in every moment? How do we see the love in the minute? There's one of the more Taoist ideas that I've been repeating a lot lately is, enlightenment is appreciation of the small. And when you can
Yeah,
appreciate simplicity, that's enlightenment. That's where you realize, it's all God, and so are you. And that's the experience where I don't feel myself wanting to really preach about that, but I love being
yeah,
able to create the spaces, and hold the space for people to come to that, you know, in their own time, or through their own experience. And I think that's
yeah,
what we do with the bridge, and that's what we do with with a lot of our drama exercises as well.
yeah. Absolutely, absolutely.
Uh,
I love what we do. I love it. I'm so honored to work with you, Mike. So honored.
Completely mutual. All right, well, we're going to wrap up here in the next few minutes, but what I usually do is the same that I normally do with our checkouts as well too. Thinking back on this conversation, and I'll be sharing this conversation as well on social media and online, but based on this conversation, what is most alive for you, Janet? What did you appreciate most about our talk tonight?
Um, I appreciated that you got up and gave your son a glass of water. That's something to drink. You know, you knew that's what had to be done in that moment, and that's what our work is about, what needs to be done in this moment. But mostly, I just appreciate that you hear me. You really hear me, and you take what I say. You could have had a whole list of questions lined up, but instead, you really took each thing that I said and you created from that the next moment. And that's what I want to learn how to do more of. I kind of go into things with a set idea of what I'm going to say or do. And I've always, my mind kind of needs that, probably because I do have ADHD. I need that structure, but I'm trusting more and more. I'm learning how to do that. And you've been a great example for me with that. I'm learning that the questions are within us and that we asking questions is really serving people. It really helps people rather than giving advice and lecturing and all of that. People want to be heard and you really want to hear people, and that is my takeaway here. That's what's so alive for me right now. I want to really settle into the moment and hear people and let go of my agenda, and I'm glad to say that it's starting to happen.
Very
And I
good.
love that you ask what's alive for you. That is did you create that? Is that your
I got
thing?
that from Trey, from Trey,
That
yeah, from
is
Trey Ashley Barron.
beautiful.
Mhm.
That is so beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for mentioning my son. I'm trying to be kinder to myself as well for having to go off script and take care of my kids. But it's as much as it I'm starting to kind of integrate that frustration and starting to see it more and more as a gift because I've been writing about my kids quite a bit for the last few months, and there's been some interest. There's a lot of people who have been saying now, Mike, you should put this into a book, and so I started writing a book about my kind of like sharing wisdom with Micah and with Eloise. So and also pictures of them dressing up and being in their costumes. So Micah's present. He's right behind the camera at the moment.
Hey, Micah.
Yeah, do you want to come and say hi?
Hey, Micah.
Micah and
Hi,
Eloise's
guy.
presence have really just reminded me that first and foremost, I'm a father. And anything that I do is really just an extension of my being a father. That's the most important thing. But yeah, there's Micah. You want to say hi?
Hi, guy. How you doing? What you got? A phone?
Playing with my phone.
Cool,
Yeah, you
cool.
want to say hi?
Micah, take a picture of me. Can you take
Micah,
a
take a
picture of
picture of Miss
me
Janet.
and get my rainbow behind me? Look at the rainbow.
I'll just try again and trust me.
Yeah, you're gonna try again and take a picture of Miss Janet. So as I'm going forward with these living library conversations as well too, and writing about my experiences as a father, that it's nice to be able to have these little interruptions that are not really just interruptions anymore. They're slices of life.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
I don't have children, so I love when your kids are around. It's like they're I get to have them. They're part of my village too.
yeah,
We're all each other's children and we're
yeah.
all each other's parents.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, and I'm going to be. It's funny. We were talking about producing a TV show the other day, so we're going to be creating special effects and all of that. So maybe this is an opportunity as well too. That as this effort with the Living Library and the bridge and the time bank and everything all starts to merge, that there's opportunities for kids too.
You know what we could do? I could come to your house and you could film us doing a workshop with the kids like we did once.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That'd
That's
be
what we're really
fun.
working towards. Great.
Cool.
Last question tonight, Janet. What did tonight's conversation make possible? What doors did this open up? What does it make possible? What might be new that we haven't considered before?
Mm. that there's nothing new.
Mm,
That's what's coming up to me. There's nothing new on this planet, which means anything can happen.
yeah.
It's like, I don't know, just talking to you just felt so peaceful and even though there were a few moments where I felt like I really wanted to get a point across, it just showed me what this gave me was how natural conversation can be,
Mm,
how back and forth it can be, how good it can be to listen. Just this is the way life ought to be when people talk to each other.
absolutely.
I didn't feel any agenda tonight really, and I like that feeling.
Yeah.
My life has all been all about my agenda,
Mhm.
so I really like this talk.
Very good. Very good. And what's this makes possible for me, and what is really cool is when we're in that flow, when there is not an agenda and we're just responding to the moment, we're also worth a lot more financially. And I'm going to make a note of that too,
Wow,
because I'm going to link this into the natural law conversations because you participated in that as that as well. And that's
interesting.
where I kind of put the building blocks together about how time banking makes universal basic income possible. So just as people are watching this and they're claiming their hours served for watching this, they can start to explore a little bit more how to change, how to earn. It's not really earning, but how to increase their value just by being a part of these conversations and listening to these conversations. So seeds are planted every time we do these kinds of conversations. So that's
Oh,
what's
that's
new in the life for me.
fascinating.
Yeah.
That's very interesting to me. Very interesting. Huh.